number 22.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Love.gov.
Thank you, Robert, for keeping
Thank
us
you,
awake for
George.
last hour.
Thank you, yeah.
Item number 22. We're going to item number 22, which is the town arborist resources and staffing level. Please.
Yes, Council, I don't have any additional information than what's in your report. However, as staff is recommending that the council consider increasing arborists from half-time to full-time. And in our report, we also recommended hiring a town in-house arborist as opposed to contract. However, as another option to that, the council could consider to do a concurrent recruitment of a town arborist and do an RFP at the same time. Both processes will take approximately the same amount of time, 2 to 2.5 months. And then at that point, we can bring back, what we get, what we receive, and for council to consider.
Beautiful.
Could
Thank you.
you clarify the two processes?
Well, one process would be to move forward with creating a position and recruiting for that position through the normal public employee process. The other process would be to do an RFP for contract arbor, full-time contract arbor services.
What's the downside? If we get a proposal, we're not obligated to take that. If we get a good candidate for a full-time in-house, we can evaluate that. Kind of my preference, I know this is only questions right now, so I'm not going to tell you my opinion.
Don't tell me.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you my
Please hold it.
I'm going to hold it. Until-
Any other questions for Mike?
In your staff report, you identified Holbrook Palmer Park as one of the needs for these type of services, but that's really what Ed Murdoch is doing. So I assume that's, as I understood it, so we could eliminate that requirement from this.
Well, yes, and actually the biggest driver of the need is all the construction activity. And, we just don't have adequate staffing to go out and ensure that the contractors are complying with the tree protection standards of the town.
Yeah, that's obviously a concern. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, let's go out to the public comments. Any public comments on item number 22? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close public comments, bring it back to council. Close up.
Can I give my opinion?
You can now, your opinion is.
So, I think it's okay to do both at the same time, RFP and the recruitment, but my hope would be that we could recruit a full-time, 40-hour, dedicated arborist for our town. We have so many trees out in our residents' properties that, our former arborists knew practically everyone by name and size and condition and everything. And, there were these Heritage Tree Awards that were every year, and I don't think we've done 2013. And I must have missed it if we did. Those kinds of activities that there would be some ownership and pride, and so that would be my hope, that we would find somebody that wanted to embrace our town and be here for our residents.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I think we've had a contractor who our costs, or I'm sure we went out with an RFP, our cost for him for half-time has been $150,000, and staff's estimate is that we could get a full-time, fully loaded employee for that cost. If we're going to go out with an RFP for a contractor full-time, we're obviously going to end up with a cost that's much more than the $150,000, and our goal here is not to increase our costs. So I think we should pursue finding an employee. I have a couple other comments. One is Ed Murdoch, I don't think, is an arborist who's charged with identifying and protecting the trees in the park. He's supervising maintenance in the park overall. And I think that we need those trees identified and taken care of. So, you know, unless I'm misunderstanding Ed's role, I think that this arborist should be charged with care for the park as well as the right-of-way. And the other issue is in your list of the various important functions that the arborist could do. Your last bullet point is resident requests for service. That sounds to me like a huge black hole that my understanding of the last employee who was an arborist fell into and had some trouble getting out of. And I'm concerned about it. And I think that if there's going to be anything related to resident requests, I would hope that we frame it so that it is, you know, a resident who is identifying a tree problem in a right-of-way or in the park. I don't think that the town arborist should be charged with principally providing services, private services to the residents. I really think it's a potential black hole, and we have such a crying need in the park and in the right-of-way that I think we should have, that should be the focus.
Absolutely. Councilman Whitman.
So, first off, to address the Vice Mayor's comments, I remember when we brought in Ed, we said that we were going to bring in somebody who would go around the park and identify what we needed to do to make everything right, what type of feeding, what type of watering, etc., for each of the trees, for each of the plants. So, and I believe he is an arborist, so I think that was one of the things that when I supported that, and I still do support it, but I think that's one of his roles. I'd like to see both versions. I think the analysis here, first off, it indicates that we need somebody 2,000 hours. Of course, in our fee study that we did just a couple months ago, we ended up saying, we calculate back. I mean, the people do take vacation, they are sick occasionally, they do take training, there is some unproductive time, and I think in our fee study we said that productive work hours from an employee in our town is actually about 1535. I think those are the exact numbers that were on that report that we all accepted and we based our fees on. Many of the things that the arborist was doing and still are doing are supposed to be charged. Going out and visiting a resident and looking at something on their tree is something that we have a fee structure for, and they're supposed to be paying for that. And when we went to the contract structure, we said we were going to go do that. And so if we're not charging for that and offsetting any additional costs, then I think that there's a problem. That all said, I understand that there is some question about individuals working and how long they can work if they're contractors and things like that. So from that perspective, having a bundled service, which a tree company may have a very discount structure. They want the tree business, and a loss leader could be the arborist. It would make sense, at least for us, to look at it so that we are comparing apples to apples. And making a good decision for the town. So, I can't say one versus the other at this point in time without having the data, but I do question some of the things that are written in here in the staff report. And so, as such, I think it's prudent for us to pursue both options and then make a decision then. So that would be my input.
Thank you, Bill. I agree. Looking at both options, seeing what we get, and seeing who does apply, we've got to do what's in the best interest, and then cleaning up some of the language. We obviously don't want to be out in private residence doing private residence duty. That's what other contract business is for. Town business is what we got to deal with, and we don't have the bandwidth to be giving it away. So I think that's kind of the direction that we should go into. And I think that's the consensus of this group, so. Good? We're good. So, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and move on to item number 23. Correct. Introduction to an ordinance amend the Title 15 of the Atherton Municipal Code, adding the new chapter related to the use of place cards to denote conditions related to the condition and occupancy of buildings. Thank you. Mike and Lisa, thank you for being here all night.
Good night.
I appreciate it. I miss you.
Let the record show.
I stopped billing now.
Yeah. All right, check. That's, put another graph on it.
All right.
Thank you.
Just
Time
very briefly, this ordinance will provide the town with the ability to post and enforce building occupancy restrictions for health and safety reasons. Once enacted, the ordinance provides the town the ability to restrict access to potentially unsafe buildings after completion of a safety assessment performed by your building official. This ordinance also provides the authority to enforce building access and use restrictions by making it unlawful for any person, firm, or corporation to alter, deface, or remove the placards. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike?
What took so long to write this?
Yeah, it's someone right.
They're nicely designed. Would they be black on white, or would they be yellow like our, construction signs, or?
Your building official, Brett Hale,
Red, yeah.
thought you might ask that question, so actually,
Colorful.
it will be green, yellow, and red, just like this. So red means no entry, yellow means restricted, green would mean inspected and safe.
Perfect.
Wow, we wish we had color
The
codes.
primary colors, or whatever.
Any other questions?
No.
I'm going to go ahead and ask the public, any public comments on this item, which is number 23. Seeing no public comments, I want to go ahead and close public comments. Final comments from council.
So moved.
Wow, we're moving right to it. Okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, I would second.
Second, any further discussion? No.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll just go aye, 4 ayes. All right, let's go ahead and move to item number 24, audiovisual design proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, you have the staff report. This is talking about doing some audio-visual improvements in the council chambers. We've got this big projector overhead, and it's hard to see sometimes, and we don't have any wireless mics. That's not really an actual component of this, but we do need some wireless mics in here. So we're talking about putting a camera up behind our nice videographer there this evening, so that it projects this way, catches the council and the audience, and we're proposing flat screen mounted televisions on either wall, one for the public, one for the council, and a system such that the city clerk and or staff liaison can mark and bookmark and add titling as we go along for our meetings. That concludes the staff report. It would be included it presently is included in the 2014-2015 budget of $25,000, and it would reduce our annual cost to mark here by approximately that same amount.
So this type of implementation that would also be movable,
Yes.
similar to chairs that we may buy or may not buy.
Correct.
When we move to a new building that doesn't come with chairs or a video
Chair with you,
system.
yes.
Okay, yes, okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure.
Make sure that we can move
So
it.
does it put Mark out of a job?
Just to clarify that, the cost is a 1-year payback, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in that, we could also consider the additional camera that would actually point at it.
Yes, you can mount another camera back here to point at the podium for another $555.
All right, beautiful.
And we could have a pass around mic so that people don't need to get up.
For Lou, correct.
For Lou, perfect. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Seeing that, well, defend yourself, come on up here, bro. To the podium it is.
I prepared something.
Hope it's short.
Put the camera on.
Oh, you did?
Okay. Thanks for the job for hiring me in 2011, late 2011. It subsidized a lot of my new equipment that I'm doing for other jobs, and I really appreciate it. I've got up to 930 uploaded right now on my laptop, so we're moving along with all this new equipment. It's great. Next thing, robots are cool. I tell my friends with young kids to learn to build robots because I recorded Steve Schmidt from Google a couple weeks ago, and he said that robots will replace 30% of the workforce. I just didn't think I'd get replaced by a robot so fast. One comment is when I got hired in 2011, early 2012, Lewis was here and Widmer, and I went, actually the only other time I spoke besides this time was I was talking about Steve Jobs proposed the new saucer building at Cupertino City Council meeting, one of the most popular city council meetings ever seen on YouTube. This video has a switcher with 3 cameras so you can see a close-up of the council members and Steve. And the solution proposed has only 1 camera with 1 wide shot. So if you ever watch C-SPAN for more than 5 minutes, any congressional meeting or press conference, you can't get through 2 minutes of it with just 1 wide shot, and it would really be a bummer. And whether it's a robot or a person, having 2 or 3 cameras with singles of speakers and integrated PowerPoint will improve your product. It'll look a lot better. So the proposed solution will consolidate labor costs but reduce image quality. So I encourage you to get like singles on everybody here. I enjoy my time working here and appreciate the work. I don't know how many 4-hour meetings I will miss. The meetings I learned a lot about news, civic activity, and responsibility. I'm very impressed by the hours and focus, dedication that the members of the council and the mayor dedicate to their jobs, and I'm in awe of their service. And the example of their donated time for the pursuit of an ideal community will be a paradigm for my life going forward. Thank you.
Mark, thank
Nice
And you did it within the time. Any other public comment?
No, you're not leaving yet. You need these for a while.
you. Yeah.
Seeing no more public comments, I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to council. Council members, any final?
Well, I think the comment on making sure we have enough cameras to have, I don't know if you need to have cameo shots on each and every one of us, but we want to be able to show somebody who's speaking and making a presentation at the same time. So it would be good if we could understand the differential of adding a camera or 2 here and making sure that we have the right number of wireless microphones. So maybe 25.5 with a 1-year payback. Maybe we need to have a 1.5-year payback. It might be worthwhile.
Yeah, as we evaluate the system, putting in, those are good comments.
And it is movable to the new building, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Mayor, is public speaking, public input in this?
There was a minute ago.
I missed it then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
A quick thing about it. Last night I watched the Palo Alto Council. The night before I saw Horsley and the San Mateo supervisors. It would stop people from sitting here all night.
Oh,
If every other
That's the
city, East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and the county, everybody but Atherton can turn on the public access channel, and they're not immediately, you don't have to watch them at the time, they rebroadcast them and
So,
everything.
can I clarify that? Can I clarify?
It's actually
Everybody,
part of the staff report, yeah.
And old people like me and Lou here don't have to sit here all night. You can sit there and listen to hot chocolate.
Okay. Maybe I could comment on that.
Please.
That's actually part of the staff report that we consider webcasting and cablecasting. Teresa's already looked into that and is working with the cable JPA.
They've been talking about it for 4 years.
but this system is not part of it.
Correct.
separate.
So I just,
Correct.
that's what I wanted to
Right.
clarify.
It's separate.
Okay,
We're looking into it. Sorry, wheels of justice take time, so
Okay.
we're working on it, John.
I'd like to make a
This is
motion.
part of the new city hall.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll move everything over there too.
I'd like to
All right,
make
so
a motion that we
please.
approve this.
Oh, comments, hold
Have
on.
another comment?
Yes.
So I just want to emphasize, I think that we should have a second camera so you get this angle as part of the system. Clearly, this should be such that it can easily be upgraded by adding the flexibility in the software to manage cams and whatever. I don't think we have to go for the whole hog right away, but I think we should have a second camera.
Well, and possibly 2 additional cameras, one here for the podium, and as Mark and one for the staff.
Maybe we can move it
Yeah.
to the next item, if the technologies are. We're good? All right, you need an action? Let's hear
Authorize
it.
staff to move forward.
Please, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further comments? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Or, let's move on. Just exactly what we wanted. Item number 25, Infrastructure Technology Ad hoc Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is just the creation of an information technology ad hoc committee, and perhaps this was kind of the brainchild of Vice Mayor Segoya in terms of looking at Santa Monica's plan that's attached to your staff report. It's recommended that the mayor appoint an ad hoc committee to address technology in the town, not internal technology like we just talked about, but external technology in the community.
That's it?
Yes.
Any questions?
And that the city council not approve or not disapprove, because if they do, it becomes Brown Act compliant.
Yeah, you just need to appoint 2 people, okay?
Just appoint 2 people. I'm appointing 2 people. And we don't need to have any further discussion on it.
No.
So I am going to appoint the vice mayor, and I'm going to appoint Councilmember Whitmer, and you guys are the technology czars.
There you go.
And we're moving on. Is that okay with you?
I accept.
Will you accept, please?
I accept,
Please.
because I suggested we have one of these years ago.
Okay, so you're czar with czar. Good, we're moving on. Item number 26, the Gilmore House, you sub.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the staff report this evening. As the council is aware, the Gilmore House, also known as the Park House or the City Manager's House, is vacant. It is used by a group on occasion for a meeting, but that's it. It's suggested that perhaps we could use it as a transient temporary housing facility for the police department. And I was actually supposed to kick this over to the police chief who's going to give the report. That's why he's looking at me that way. So I will-
You're doing fine, keep going, you're on a roll.
Don't take away his thunder.
No,
Come on, the chief has some
He's ready to
thunder.
go, come on.
perhaps I speak faster, but here you go, chief.
No, very good. The staff brought this forward as discussions proceeded about how to use the Gilmore House. The whole issue of fatigue for officers is a big deal for management and police. The officers typically work a 12-hour shift from 7 to 7. It's often referred to as a 3-12-4, 12-3, 3 days 1 week, 4 days the next. The issue comes in is that many of our officers are commuter officers. They travel over from Central Valley and all kinds of other places and spend a lot of time in the car driving to work. Well, you tack on an hour and a half or an hour on each end of those 12 hours, complicate the matter with courts, callbacks, and lots of other compelling issues. We have a problem with the officers not getting enough rest. And in fact, our policy says once they've worked 16 hours, they got to go home. They have to go somewhere. So allowing them to use the house as not necessarily to live there, but at least to catch some sleep there on their off work weeks would allow them to come back to work more refreshed and better able to do their job. In addition, if we need them, they're not an hour and a half away. They're just down the street. I think there's a lot of other benefits to that, to include having security in the park, security at the house, the ability to call them back. All of those things I think are good. And it also gets them off the road and less pollutants in the air, if you would. So, I think it's a good recruiting measure. And many of the agencies, because I work with them in this county, struggle with having places for officers to stay or finding adequate, affordable housing in the area. So that's kind of the nature of our business right now. It's having a lot of officers that are commuting considerable distances. So allowing the officers to use the house during off-shift hours would provide a police presence in the park in the evening and overnight hours, provide security for the Gilmore House, serve as a police officer recruiting and retention benefit, and in the event of an emergency, if off-shift officers are needed, they can return to work much more rapidly. As with all prior residents of the uses of the house, the officers would be required to walk through HP Park and provide security over there. That concludes,
Well, there'd be a number of administrative things that we would have to do as well. That the APOA is proposed to be responsible for interior housekeeping costs, utility costs, damages, insuring their own personal items, etc. The town would be responsible for exterior maintenance and major repairs. The town would make minor improvements to facilitate our continued use, some initial maintenance, some cleaning, some repairs, locks on the doors. The majority, if not all, the furnishings would be donated or provided by the APOA, PAL, or Police Foundation, or others. The town may purchase some small items that would contribute to our use of the premises, perhaps a conference table or something like that. There would be an established set of house rules. Users would be required to sign and acknowledge those rules. Users would be required to check out a key for their use, so there's an sign in, sign out. And there'd be a formalized agreement that this is not a continuing benefit, not subject to meet and confer. If the town needed the house for any other purpose, you'd give reasonable notice and out they go.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any questions for the chief or the town manager? Don't race. Don't jump over. Councilwoman Lewis, please.
Lots of questions, lots of comments.
Questions first, please.
But the questions kind of go into comments because it's discussion. It's not a technical
Okay,
question.
then we'll hold those in
I have
this
a
discussion.
question, a real question.
A technical
Please.
question.
Start.
So at one time there was, I think the Parks and Rec had talked about actual rental of the house and I never got a definition. I've heard rumors that because it's part of the park, that has to be eliminated, that's not,
As
it
a
was
venue?
gonna, yeah, no, not as a venue, but as renting it to, say, somebody who wanted to live in Atherton or an Atherton resident. I don't know if, I've heard comments that it is, I guess that's the question.
That's the purview of the council, if that's something you'd like the house for, but what
No,
is that gonna come out of?
the grant of the park
Ah.
to the town said that it could only be used for a first-class recreational facility.
Okay, that's what I thought I'd heard, but I wanted to verify it.
Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of legal wiggle room in that, so I can't, I mean, if, for instance, if it were a town employee that you quote rented it to, and then part of their duty was to check the park, and that's pretty common in a lot of cities, they do that, because that's deemed to be a park use. Police, notice, police would be using it, but it would be a benefit to the community as well, because they would be there armed and dangerous, or whatever police are.
And they would be taxable, that benefit would not be taxable.
Yeah.
Right.
But, yeah, so, because I gotten a number of calls from residents, and they said, well, I thought that the Parks and Rec was suggesting that we rent the house, and that would bring in substantial, but I thought that the issue, it would cause complications with the will.
Yeah, for instance, the school facility in the park, that schools are considered park uses because they're educational and parks are, that's one of the components you can do.
Okay.
But you are right, that did come out of one of their discussions at one of the meetings, they suggested that the house be rented, and the revenue from that return to the park.
Right, but we're saying that we don't believe that that's a viable use
Correct.
and would cause complications and could be debated, so, okay.
Correct.
Perfect, thanks.
So,
Question? Question?
I have a comment. A question.
Comments hold? Comments are, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Cool. Question? Nope, we're good. Public comments, please, on this item. Please step up.
John Ruggiero, I hate to disagree with my good friend, the chief, but as an example, my younger son is a police officer in San Francisco. He travels 40 miles to and from work from Petaluma, across the Golden Gate Bridge every day, twice. Most all the officers do. And they don't have the luxury, the San Francisco police, of the luxury we have in Atherton, to do a 12-hour shift, which means you go home and you're off for 4 days. The Atherton police work 14.4 days a month out of a 30-day month. The San Francisco police work 17 days a month, and that's just the officers. The lieutenants and captains above work 8-hour shifts. The point I'm getting at is Atherton has it really made down here. My son patrols an area in the Richmond district of 50,000 population. The officers here patrol maybe 6,000 or 8,000, it all depends. And to give them this rest area, where are the beds? It's gonna be like a firehouse with beds and all that, and cooking, and they have female officers and male officers. How are they all gonna differentiate this? I think it's just opening a can of worms. There's 3 alternatives. I've talked to people in Atherton about the use of this house. One is possibly allowing the preschool group to come back over there. The other is to rent it out to a citizen. And you'd pick up $100,000 a year roughly, and you could have a yearly, just a 1-year mortgage or 1-year use of the house, and pay a heavy fee, a safety fee in front, and just get a short term and pick up 100,000. But officers, what about the officers' wives and their family? Why aren't they home for 4 days? They get off, they work 3 days, 12 on, 12 off. We used to work, get off at 8 in the morning, have to be back at 4 in the afternoon. Big deal.
Thanks, John. Any other public comments, please step up.
Dorsley, 227 Catalma. Well, I don't have the police experience that the two gentlemen here have, but it does strike me as though this is an asset of the towns, and we need to make some money from it. So I really second John's comments. I think if we can find a way to make some money of it, that's better than having this be some sort of a playhouse for some of our town employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Lou Papumas, McBain Avenue, right off the top. I'm 100% opposed to giving this property to the use of the police department. These poor, overworked darlings that get over 60% of the money that comes into the town. You want to make them into little babies, for goodness sakes. They're grown men, they have families, they have responsibilities. Before this chief became chief in this town, where the two previous chiefs were promoted from the ranks, do you know we couldn't even get them to write citations? They wouldn't write a parking citation. They wouldn't write a traffic citation. They were just overworked. Now, let's get into the costs. If we do this, as John mentioned, we've got to divide the property into two, because you got male and female. Then this one wants this one, that one wants that one. All you're going to do is have a bunch of increased cost to this town. For what? For these fellas that are sitting in on a sweetheart job? You could fire every one of them and you would get 1,000 responses from New York to San Francisco, from the Canadian border to the Mexican border, and they'd be darn glad to get this job. If you get a murder or some big thing, Atherton police don't handle that. That's turned over to the sheriff's department. So these guys have been babied too much. With all due respect to you, Chief, I don't think that hall or that residence should be given to them for a second reason. With all due respect to our city manager, he may not be here tomorrow, and his time is limited here. With all the transportation that he's doing from back home to the East Bay, there could be an accident, anything could happen. Not that I wish that to him, but his position could be open, and the next person coming in should have the right to live in that hall. That's all that I have, but I'm definitely 100% opposed to giving that to the police department. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and, please.
Luckner, 89 Virginia Lane. I'm a little shocked and just want to take solace in the fact that I think there are very few people in our community that would agree with the comments of the last speaker. I want to have issues in this community addressed on the basis of their merit, including their cost and their need. But I think that we should steer away from having attacks on people, especially when they are unfounded, as part of our discussion. So I pray for peace and speak, I think, for the very vast majority of our residents.
Here. Any other comments related to this item? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close public comments, bring it back to council. Councilman Whitmer. How about hitting the deck?
Sure. First off, I think the town needs to maintain the house in the park. You know, as was pointed out by Lou's comments, and you know, we don't know what the future's going to bring. And, you know, we may need, a new city manager may come back in, you know, George may decide to retire or move on. Same thing, we may have an issue with the police chief. So we have some senior executives that would come into this town, and we may not be able to get who we want if we don't have at least the option of being able to house them should they so choose. And if it's our prerogative to do so. I don't think that this proposal by the chief precludes that, and in fact, I think that the conditions that the city manager has put together said that there'd be very, you know, the police would be essentially using it for a period of time, and with very short notice if we choose to change it back to whatever we want it to be. I attended back in 2005 a disaster response program that actually was hosted by then Mayor Marsala. It was very sobering, just on the heels of the Katrina disaster. And the fire chief, as well as the then police chief, said to everybody in the audience, if there's a disaster here, nobody's going to come to get you for weeks, because people don't live here. Our police officers, the fire department, they don't live here. They can't afford to live here. This is a big issue for this whole region. In fact, the mayor and I just last week or a couple weeks ago attended the HEART function. And that's the big focus, is to provide affordable housing for the people that are providing the infrastructure that we have that are not necessarily paid at the level that we have. Teachers, policemen, firemen. And so they're living far away, and we're losing officers because it's a big struggle on their families. And so some of them may not take this. But I think that really the way the chief as well as the city manager are putting this together, it would be a benefit if they get it, but it's a benefit to the town as well. First off, the house is there. I'd rather see the police chief or the police department in there using it, and a benefit for them, keeping them in our town, making them available should we have such a disaster, making them available for the park, reviewing what's going on in the park, then move a play school over there, where then we would lose that facility forever. So for me, I think